Yat Thank you for listening to this podcast. She Peter Desert III in Shia. Trachini Nishle. Kintley Genie Bashichin. Ashin Hidashichedo. Twohiglini Dashnala. I run this podcast, 21st Century Native Leaders. Please comment on Facebook at 21st Century Native Leaders or on Instagram, Navajo Podcaster. This episode has two sponsors, Celani Professional Business Consulting Services, LLC, a Navajo-owned business. Contact TPBCS for business development and technical assistance if you are interested in entering, expanding, or improving your business. Contact Celani Professional Business Consulting Services at 480-980-0211 or on Facebook, TPBCS. The second sponsor is Desert Consulting. Contact Desert Consulting for your tax needs at 505-278-8185 or follow them on Facebook at Desert Consulting for your tax needs. Joining me on 21st Century Native Leaders, my name is Peter Desert III, and I am here with Temryss Lane. Temryss is an Indigenous scholar, sports broadcaster, MC, coach, and former collegiate and professional soccer player. Additionally, she is a N7, Nike N7 ambassador. Thanks for being on the show, Temryss.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So tell me about yourself, your tribal affiliation, and where you come from.
Good morning, Aiskuchio. My Lemi name is Khalitia, and my birth name is Temryss. I come from the Golden Eagle clan of Lemi Nation. I'm the daughter of Galen Lane and the daughter of Lydia Bennett, who's Scottish, Irish, English, and Ukrainian heritage. My grandparents are the late Sway Luce and Sneetna, Vernon, and Nancy Lane. And we're the Seven people. So I come from Coast Salish, Northwest Washington, the Salish Sea.
Wow, that's powerful. That's a nice area as well. So how did you start playing soccer?
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate to grow up in a soccer-heavy community. Really, Seattle, Vancouver, even Portland have been pretty on the forefront of U.S. soccer. I guess Vancouver would be considered Canada, but still kind of part of the same region. And so growing up, I got to play with my brothers, cousins, and at about the age of 4, I started playing just to hang with the boys. I have an older brother and older cousins, and even some of my female cousins were playing. And I really fell in love with it. I also I danced ballet, and then I quit ballet so that by the age of 12, so that I could focus on soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a reality that I could go somewhere with it and use it as a navigation tool for education.
Wow, that's powerful. I have 3 daughters, and each of them have played soccer, one all the way through high school. And she could have went to college to play, but she chose the academic route. And our youngest daughter, Marley, she does soccer, and she's actually a really good dancer. But it's amazing how there's a connection, how there's similarity between what you did and the path you took. But I noticed there's starting to be an increase of natives in soccer. Do you think that's right? I know. So just so everyone knows, we're raising our hands and fist bumping. But do you think that could be linked to the indigenous people playing lacrosse in that game? Because there are some similarities, correct?
Yeah, actually, I just had this conversation. I was in First Nations territory, and Entlakatmuk is the people that I were visiting. And forgive me if I said the name wrong. If you're hearing this, there was a series of communities from Lilawat to Ashcroft. In being in First Nations, I was there with someone who is a lacrosse coach, and we were talking about the Creators Game as lacrosse, and really how there are a lot of parallels in the game. And I'm not familiar, unfortunately. I never had the opportunity or the privilege of playing lacrosse. But from what I understand and the teachings of the game, I think there are so many parallels, and I would like to learn more about really the roots, the Bogadaway, the Ojibwe game, all the way up to the Haudenosaunee, from their teachings as the Creators Game, and my understanding of football, I prefer football because it makes more sense and it situates us as Native Americans and First Nations people with the rest of the world, because truly global football is the world's game, and it spans across every walk of life. And in my understanding of the game and my experience is it's really just like the ultimate connector. You can connect with people across cultures. The ball is round, much like our Mother Earth. It's infinite in the way that it moves, and I think there are so many things that we can learn from playing the game, watching the game, experiencing the game, and experiencing it in different cultures. So like I said, I'm unfamiliar with lacrosse, but the coach that I was speaking to said that there's absolutely a lot of parallels, especially if you think of it in the context as the Creators Game and a way to transform conflict, a way to have outlets for a need to have this like sanctioned violence, if you may. I think it's we were talking about young boys and girls even, but the need for like this boys group. There was a leader that led a boys group, and how they have to have some sort of physical, I'll use the word rough, outlet. This is a group of boys that has had challenges, whether it was parental in the home or educationally. And this leader said that rough housing or that outlet, that safe space to kind of be human in the need to have some form of physical contact, that at times can be aggressive, but isn't necessarily violent in the way that's going to do long-term harm, is really important. And I think you see that in hockey, you see that in American football, you see that in soccer, you see that in lacrosse, you see that in rugby, you see that in every competition where you're going head-to-head with opponents. There's a need for that, and there's we play those sports often because of it, because of that competitive sanctioned violence. So I'm not advocating for violence, but I'm advocating for safe spaces like sports where you can have a release of that energy that you might otherwise keep inside and could come out in a form that is not beneficial for society.
Right, and I can definitely see that. I mean, in fact, I think I started playing football, American football, back in middle school, and before that I used to get into a lot of fights and taking out my anger and aggression in a different way. But then luckily I had the foresight of a coach to say, Deswood, hey, come over here, why don't you play football, try this out, right? So I did that, and it actually put me on track. If I didn't do sports, I'm not too sure if I'd be as successful as I am today, right? So I can definitely see that parallel in how you have to channel that energy. You have to find a way to release that energy. I mean, your frustrations throughout the day, right?
Yeah, not just that. I think if we take a look at our Native communities and how resilient our ancestors are, and how we have come from a lot of historical and intergenerational trauma. And although our ancestors did their best at healing and holding on to those healing modalities, the things that they weren't able to heal, whether they endured residential schools or boarding schools, it is our job then to heal across generations. And one of the things that Chief Willie Littlechild, who is the delegate for United Nations, he actually implemented the 1977 World Indigenous Games. He has a role in the North American Indigenous Games. He was a high-level hockey player. And he's also a doctor and a PhD. And he's the one that said to me, well, we have the right to play. As human beings, we have the right to play, whatever that sport is. We also have the right to heal, and we have the right to happiness, which means a balance. The happiness and wellness is a balance between the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And when we're playing those sports, those provide all of those modalities, I suppose, of what it means to be human. And so if you endured abuse like Chief Willie Littlechild did in residential schools, he went to 3 of them, he said that, if you really think about the idea of energy, whatever you take on, it has to go somewhere. So either it's going to come out in the form of anger or violence, or if you're playing a sport, like you said for yourself, it gives you an opportunity to have that outlet.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's powerful. So talk with me about the transition, like, you played soccer collegiately and then professionally. Was there a big jump to get to that professional level? Talk with me about that.
It's interesting because I think I've had 3 knee reconstructions, actually 2 reconstructions in one scope. And before my first knee surgery, my sophomore year of college, I felt that I was 19. And I was just starting to kind of transform from being a girl to a woman, and then the difference of what that meant as a player, and the strength that comes along with that. And after my knee surgery, you have to go through a whole nother recovery process, and it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I dreamt of playing on the women's national team, and I made it to the U23 national team, then had my knee injury, so that set me back. And about a year and a half later, got called up again, tore my knee again, didn't get to take that opportunity. So by the time I finished my collegiate career, I had 2 surgeries and just was kind of, it was kind of a race against time because you only have so much eligibility collegiately. And simultaneously, the year that I graduated, 2004, the second women's professional league in the United States folded. So my dreams of playing professionally were not as on the forefront of my mind as playing for the women's national team, primarily because it wasn't really an option. They created the leagues pretty much right after the 1999 World Cup, which is the Women's World Cup here in the United States, which is, I started at the university in 2000. So only in those 4 years did I even consider what it would mean to go play professionally. By the time I graduated, that league had folded. They since have revived the women's professional leagues twice. So now they're on the 3rd version of the professional league. So my dreams of playing pro were not necessarily. It wasn't necessarily a goal because I didn't know it could be one. So I graduated. I worked. I took a break because I was pretty brokenhearted after all these knee surgeries. And then I worked in sales and marketing in advertising in the Bay Area. And I felt a lack of passion. All that to say that the game found its way back into my life. I started playing co-ed, and then I started playing women's rec league, and then I started playing with a former teammate of mine who played at Stanford. We played against each other in the Pac-10 at the time, and she and I were longtime friends. We'd known each other since we were 13, since we played at high levels, and opponents. We were opponents, but when we played on the regional teams, we played together. And then after we played on the women's rec team, she kind of led the way in getting invited to go play for the semi-professional team. And I went with her. Like, she was just one of my favorite teammates. We were teammates. So anywhere she went, she took me. She was like, gotta bring my friend. So after she left the Bay in 2008 to go play professionally in Sweden, and I actually quit my job and decided to go travel Europe. And so I went to Spain, Turkey, Greece. And by the time I was done with my travels, it was serendipitous that not for Lena, but one of the Balinga IF, which is a team in the top division in Sweden. The division is called Damallsvenskan. The center back had blown out her knee. And so things come full circle. Natalie said, I have a teammate will fill this job and fill it well. And so they recruited me and brought me over. And so in terms of what I did to get there was I just had to stay in the game, more or less. And then the opportunities opened up. And it was definitely women's collegiate Division I soccer is some of the best that you're going to see. I would imagine that at different times, I mean, the NWSL you've got some amazing international talent. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the top Division I teams couldn't go head to head with those NWSL teams as well. And I'm sure it happens in trainings and whatnot. That being said, I know that the women's league is getting stronger and stronger, and some of the best international talent is here in the United States. So the jump is the biggest difference is that as a professional, you don't have coaches, trainers, doctors, all these different things over your back or over your, saying like, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. You're a professional. You have to treat it like it's your job. So you have to, I spent when I wasn't training for 2.5 hours with the team, I spent another 2.5 hours doing fitness, whether that was running or in the gym. And that was all on my own time. So there's just a different accountability to it when you play at the top. And the women are stronger in Sweden. I'll say that much. They're so strong, and you just have to adapt to the way that they play. And I'm going into a country where I don't speak their language. Fortunately, many of them speak English, but on the field as a center back, your responsibility is to be in command, and that means that you need to know really key words. So I had to learn some Swedish.
That's amazing. So tell me about the mental aspects to the game.
It's all mental. As much as it's physical, it's all mental. It's fun, right? We forget, like, we play, the word is play because it's fun. For me, fun also means being competitive. And, I have a joke, like, how do you spell fun, W-I-N? Because I'm a competitor. So I think confidence is probably one of the biggest things that I've been able to take away from being a top level athlete. And recognizing that when you're not confident, and you doubt yourself, then things might waver, or, that's when mistakes are made. And I don't think that you just walk in being confident. Confidence comes with repetition and building character, and it comes with failure. And from the failure is where you learn how to get better. So, of course, it's mental. I miss that level of intensity. I think that's something that you really only get in moments of high pressure. And mentally, you have to be on the same page as your team, and that's when you find the most success.
Wow, that's powerful. And you mentioned a little bit about failure in there. But what was your strategy to overcome the failure or a setback like your knee?
The failure of my knee, right? That's something you can't control. And I think learning the aspects of who you are, and really my identity was really defined by Temryss, the soccer player. I was always Native, but then really like what I did as a soccer player, and the success I found as a soccer player helped me understand my own identity. And so then when you have that taken away because of injury or, missed opportunities, like not going with the U23 national team, even though I felt so much like I deserved it because I earned it. I worked so hard to get to that point. You have to really take a step back and understand identity in a different way. But also recognizing that the failure is just part of it. And a lot of that failure you can't control. There's a lot of things that you can, like the failure of my knee, there's nothing I could have done in that moment. There's nothing I could have done. And my surgeon would say, if you were going to tear your ACL, you were going to do it eventually. And, you cannot take risks, but that's no fun. I read once, some general quote of the only reward in easy is that it's easy. And I believe that, because the harder you work, the greater the reward. So the failure of my knee was devastating, but it taught me that I'm resilient, and it taught me that it taught me a lot about healing and what it means to return to the pain in order to heal yourself. And it's the hardest work if we're talking about physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think a lot of people avoid doing that work. And I think the time will come when we are given the choice to do that difficult work, whether it's on our bodies or our spirit or our minds, however it is. I choose to, walk towards that fear and know that on the other side of the pain, because when you heal, like I really think about my knee and as a metaphor or analogy or parallel really to just healing soul wounds or relationships, that it's painful. Healing is not and it's not finite either. It's not like you go and you do the work and you're healed, because for example, with my knee, I still have hip. It's either my IT band is tight and then my hip is off, and then from my hip, my back is off. So unless I'm constantly taking yoga or doing my stretches or making sure that I'm prioritizing my health, then I have to do even deeper work to make sure that I keep the healing up. And so I think that's one of the main things that failure teaches you is not just where your weaknesses are, but also where your strengths are, and how strong and powerful we all can be. But that doesn't mean avoiding the pain. That means going towards it and acknowledging it, but being really gentle and compassionate with yourself.
Wow, that's amazing. I like the way you stated that, and weaved in your mental aspect, your spiritual aspect of it, and I think that's important. So how important, through the whole process, playing collegiately and professionally, how important is your diet?
It's extremely important. You are what you eat. And it absolutely impacts your performance. And, there's a science to it for a reason. And I think more and more people are learning that certain things don't work in their body. And like some people are, we grew up drinking milk. And it was just kind of like what you were supposed to do. Like milk does a body good. So it's like the whole marketing of dairy. And I still love cheese. And I still drink cream in my coffee. But, some people don't respond well or have lactose intolerance. So it's learning what works within your body, and everything in moderation, including moderation. So I don't think completely limiting yourself from something that gives you joy is like, should you have cake and ice cream? Probably not every day, and probably not even, maybe once a week or twice a month or something. But if you limit yourself completely, then, if you react in a negative way to it, then you should probably think about what it's worth. And as an athlete, I was anemic my freshman year, and I didn't know it. So I was tired all the time. And it was just poor diet. I was a freshman, eating in the dorms, trying to save money, and eating crappy fast food, and educating yourself on, and eating just lots of vegetables, and eating clean, I think, is really important these days, because unfortunately we're at a place in a time in humanity where our food has been modified so much that it's actually expensive to eat really healthy. So you have to plan accordingly and do your best to budget so that you're prioritizing healthy food. And I carry a water bottle with me everywhere I go. I love water bottles. They're one of my favorite gifts to receive because I lose them all the time. But I carry a water bottle everywhere I go. So I think hydration is a number one priority. Drink more water than you think you should, and bring a water with you everywhere. If you have a water bottle with you, I realize that I'm dehydrated when I forget my water bottle at home. Yeah. So bring it with you everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I try to drink 2 of these a day in my office. They're 32 ounces, so...
There you go.
Absolutely. Yep. So whenever you take a look at back your playing prior to going to college, what are some skills or advice you would have for a high school student going, preparing and thinking about going to play collegiately?
Well, one of the main things that you can control is your fitness. You can control how fit you choose to be, and that just takes pure dedication and determination to outrun, outperform. And fitness can take you a long way in whatever sport it is that you play, but it can't get you on the team. It can just it can at least separate you from others if you're matched in terms of talent level or skill level, and you step on the field and you can last longer, and maybe you're stronger pushing people off the ball or whatever, then I think that's something you can control. So if you're thinking about playing collegiately, then you have to prioritize how fit you are. And of course, soccer is one of the most demanding sports there are, because you need to be able to sustain for 90 minutes at the minimum. So there's that. I would say skill-wise, you should always be doing extra. I wasn't the most technical player in the sense that I was a defender. So typically midfielders, forwards, attackers, had more ability on the ball, dribbling. And I was strong, but I wasn't the most technical. And I knew that I had to spend extra time on my left foot. I'm not ambidextrous. It was not natural for me to play with my left foot. That included striking the ball, passing. So I spent time on both feet, but I would always spend extra time with the ball and a wall, doing as many touches. The more touches you get, the better. Really, I think as an adult, one thing that one of my teammates who is a coach, I watched her coach once, and she's a center midfielder, so she was super technical. One of the things she said was like, how does the ball feel on your feet? So it's like developing the relationship with the ball at your feet, and so that you don't have to watch. You should just be able to know how it feels on all the surfaces of your feet. I recommend going to Beast Mode Soccer. They have an incredible YouTube channel with tiny cones and drills that you can do with 1, 2, 3 people. He's a good friend of mine, and he's developed a curriculum for professional players to enhance their game. So don't think that just because someone's made it professionally means they stop training, even the tiny stuff. They're still doing the same work that kids aspiring to play in college are doing. They're just way better at it. They're faster at it. They're sharper at it. And Tobin Heath is one of the most technical players that we have on both women's and men's national team. And she spends countless hours getting touches on the ball. So you don't need to have a trainer. You don't need to have a teammate. You really just need you and the ball. If you can, go find a wall. You can do 1,000 things off the wall. Just get to know the ball. Build your relationship. Build your relationship with that ball. That's your best friend.
Wow, that's great advice. So taking a look back at your life and where you're at right now, what do you think prepared you the most to be successful?
A supportive family and team, and knowing that I could do anything I put my mind to as long as I worked hard. I also I also wasn't afraid of taking risks. I come from a long lineage of athletes and competitive personalities, I suppose. My father was a great athlete. My grandfather, my aunties, my mom was a gymnast and a ballerina. She's still to this day prioritizes her fitness. She gets up at 5:30 every day and goes to the gym or goes and takes her bar class. And she's been that way for my whole life. I've never not known my mom to make fitness her priority. So it's just kind of been a way of life. And as I pursued my passions, whether it be in dance when I was 3 to 12, now I'm a dancer again. I dance again. Came back to that. Less chance of injury, which is important in your 30s. And people that believing in myself because others believed in me. I definitely didn't do this alone.
Mm-hmm. That's important to have a support system. So I know in the introduction you introduced yourself in your language. How important is your culture?
The most important. Everything that I am is because of my ancestors before me. My culture is, I feel so grateful to know who I am and where I come from. And when I talked about my identity as a soccer player, I think it's been a healing practice for me, and it's been my way of life, but it's because I have this base and understanding of knowing what land and what water I come from. And I only as a mature adult was I able to kind of turn and look back after I left, right? And say, wow, like, how fortunate am I to come from this unconditional love of ancestral knowledge and wisdom that comes from the sea, that comes from the land, that honors our relatives in the ocean, that swim on the land, the four-legged, two-legged, the winged, and really the teachings of who we are as spiritual people help keep me grounded and help guide me in an understanding of what it means to be human and what a blessing it is to be here and have the opportunities and the privilege of playing sport. And for me, sport and education go hand in hand. You can't separate them. I would not have been a successful soccer player if I were not a successful student. Especially as a Native woman, we have to prioritize our education. And that means higher education is also ancestral knowledge, indigenous wisdom. It's not just the academy, that's part of it. Getting a degree, if you're so, it's a privilege, though. It's not available to everyone. I recognize that. So that's part of the work that I want to do is making sure, and that I do is making sure that I use my privileges to turn around and making sure I'm advocating on behalf of my community.
Wow, that's powerful. Is there anything else you would like to share?
I feel good. I think for the youth, I just want to say, keep going. I think, not to be taken too far out of context, but when you have fear, I like to say you walk towards it. You face it, ask yourself what it is that you're fearing. And as long as it's safe, violence and things along those lines, like, I'm not suggesting you walk towards violence, but if it's a fear of taking risks or it's a fear of the unknown, let your intuition or your heart or your ancestors guide you, and know that you are supported, and know that you are supported by those that came before you and those that are here, and all of us, all of us who have taken the risks and failed, and also found success through that failure. But face it, and on the other side of it, you'll see that if you stand up to it and you have courage, that there's a reward. But be diligent and make sure that you prioritize education. And, you got to do the work. It's not always fun. It's not always pretty. But the reward is great.
Wow, such wise words. I appreciate that. And how can people contact you if they want you to come and talk? I notice you do guest speaking and motivational speaking. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. On social media, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Temryss Lane. That's TEMRYSSLANE. And also my website is my first and last name, so temrysslane.com. And you can reach out to me there, fill out a form, let me know what you're interested in, and perhaps I'll be able to come make a visit to your community.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate all the support that you all give me and continue to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoy the future episodes. Please comment on Facebook at 21st Century Native Leaders or on Instagram, Navajo Podcaster. Thank you.